This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 133.
I still teach typing.
Do you really?
Yes, I do.
Do you really?
Yeah, so
You also work with, K through.
and
Well,
there's
this is
an
interesting.
intentionality behind it, and I will explain
Maybe we
my
save this
reasoning.
for another session, but I would love to debate this with you because I would love a gentleman that's been in education for about 50 years. I would love to hear what. No, in all seriousness, like what's the type?
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I'm here with my good friends and my co-hosts today. As always, this time in person, Mr. Matt Rogers. I'll spare you a nickname today. I'll be kind.
All right.
Mr. Ryne Anthony
Hello.
and Mr. Tom Guellich.
Hello?
Did I say your name right?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
We've only known each other, what, 10,
Starting off with a
15
bang.
years?
Yeah.
Would you like to correct me?
It's Guellich.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So
So
we
the
are here.
EUC is silent.
Yeah.
We are here. We're clearly not going to have any fun today to wrap up our summer series, which, again, if this is the first time you're listening to our podcast, in the summertime, we like to focus on specific professional development topics where we can dive a little bit deeper as opposed to our typical show format where we have on one or two amazing educators, learn about them, their passions, and how they've connected with students and made education a better place. So today we're going to talk about the future of education, specifically technology and STEM related. And that's how we've all gotten to know each other for the last 5 years, I think, 7 years, right? So, Ryne, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your past as an educator? Maybe
Sure.
you can do it short for once.
Nope.
And then what you do here, where we are recording live at Flux Space.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ryne Anthony. I'm a former 8th grade science teacher. Taught 8th grade science for close to 11 years. Got into like a STEM ed tech coaching role, and had a really cool opportunity at my old district to renovate an outdated space. And in that project, I got frustrated about what should go in it, what technology works, what does the space design impact, things like that. So kind of became really passionate about figuring that out and what spaces like this presented learning opportunities to my students and what ed tech worked best. Do we get a 3D printer? Why are we having a 3D printer? So I found myself kind of studying that, putting it together, and through that process, created what we called the hub at my old district. And it was cool seeing the opportunities it created students. So I think for me, I got excited and passionate about, well, why can't every district have a hub, or why can't we create these really cool learning environments for students, but more importantly, the really cool experiences that were coming out of these spaces. So what we created here at Flux Space, I was very fortunate to kind of put that idea out into the universe about some kind of consulting vendor rep relationship. I was able to meet a gentleman by the name of Bill Corbett. We're here at the Corbett Inc. Experience Center. He had a similar vision about improving the learning experience overall and shaping what the future of ed looks like. And him and I kind of hit it off and made a decision to kind of start up Flux Space together. So it lives here within the Corbett enterprise. And so Flux Space Innovations LLC, we help schools, we partner with schools. The word I like to use is demystify. It's fancy, but it helps schools navigate what we think the future of education looks like from a very consultative solutions. Here's what we think it's moving, but here's the doing part of it. We experiment with these things, we test it out. So Flux Space has become this hands-on experience center for educators, students, the community members to come experiment, play what the future of education can look like. Not just a flash in the pan, but not tech just for tech's sake, but something that's a little bit more intentional planning and helping schools improve their learning experiences and pushing the boundaries about what they're doing with their kids. So yeah, it's been good.
Thanks for the short version of that.
Yeah.
So,
Sure that was the
Sorry,
short
yeah.
version.
A little passionate, as you can tell.
So when we all first met and really started working together, we started an event called STEM Camp EDU. And I remember when we were starting that, and I know Matt felt the same, we knew the organizer through a technology experience, and I didn't really have much STEM experience. And then I met Tom, who had been teaching STEM, doing STEM for years, and really taught us everything that we know. So Tom, why don't you introduce yourself? And
I'm Tom Guellich. I've worked for the same district I'm on my 23rd year now.
Holy moly.
Yeah. And when I started there, I was teaching second grade for a little while, moved up to fourth, and I was really disheartened by the complete lack of any kind of tech ed that was in any of the classrooms. It was a mess. So I started to really bug the board and bring them in and show them weird things I was doing with my students. And then the opportunity arose where the board said, look, why don't you just create like another special and just teach this to every student in the entire school. So that's where when I left fourth grade, and that's been, I think, my 14th or 15th year of what would be considered like a STEM class, where at the time that term didn't even exist at all. Mm-hmm. It was just, I do this weird thing that no one else is doing. And now everyone's doing it. And it's awesome to see how it has evolved. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm still doing right now. I'm K through 5 now. I teach at 2 different schools. And I would say one of the highlights this year is I brought back wood shop for my students, like a traditional wood shop. And some people might think that's kind of a step backwards, but for these kids who don't have that hands-on experience, it was a huge step forward in my opinion. So
cool.
That's great.
So as we jump into kind of the topic at hand for the episode, really, I guess for you, Tom, you have seen transitions in education. You were a unicorn going out there in more ways than one, maybe, but going out there and trying some new things. Ryne, I know from your experience, seeing an opportunity, getting super psyched, seeing your kids super excited about it. We happened to jump on board at the right time before it became popular. And over the past few years, we've seen, innovative education and STEM, or whatever the case you want to frame it, have acronyms and labels like project-based learning and whether it's the robotics and coding and the influence of that type of stuff. We've seen it done well. We've seen plenty of examples of it seen not done well for the justification of saying, I think I'm doing the right thing. What are some of those pros of the growing process? And what are some of the things that you feel like going forward are the kind of foundational principles to make it quality?
Yeah, I think for me, when I was working with my students, I realized days where I introduced them or I gave them an experience, like something they could do or something they experiences, was much more beneficial than like, hey, sit down, get the information. So in the work, it's like everybody has their own acronym, STEM, STEAM, Stramella, whatever you want to put out there. But I think the key part that I always gravitated towards was the idea of like student-centered learning. So the idea of like moving students from just passive receptors of knowledge to active participants. And if these spaces and experiences made them active participants, we're heading in the right direction. So a lot of the work that I was doing then, before Flux Space was just seeing what other schools were doing. And they were saying they were doing STEM and they were saying they had maker spaces, but you go visit it and it just was stuff sitting on shelves, or they had a 3D printer which wasn't being used because nobody knew how to use it. It's just an administrator or somebody said, oh, we're making a maker space. Pick a 3D printer. Like there's no intention behind the experiences that you're building. So I think like part of what we want to do and what I saw is focus on learning as an experience and what are the products, programs, stuff that's going to support that experience, whether it be just cardboard and upcycled materials, prototyping type things, all the way up to digital fabrication with laser cutters and printers, is have an intention behind what experiences you're trying to build. And then off of that, match the products, programs. What does the space look like? What does support look like? So have a reason for it. So schools that, not that you have to plan everything and be super organized, but at least have a clear vision of we're trying to create these types of experiences for our students and then backfill all this stuff from there. Not just, hey, we're going to do STEM or maker spaces, but that's why I think we get excited about the tours that we do and the people that are coming here, because they get to see what we're experimenting with. They get to see their students here interacting with it. So just more intention behind things. With a little bit of a focus on what experience is the student going to get. And then once you're focused on that, I think the rest kind of falls into place. So,
well, I'm sure you've seen this stuff change over
man.
14 years. So
Oh,
how
absolutely.
do you
Was it
feel
23 years?
to 23 years as a teacher? So to add on to what Matt said, how do you feel your evaluation process for like bringing back woodshop and your justification for how you evaluate what your students' experience has changed, and what is that criteria for you now?
Most importantly, I look where I want when I get to teach a child from K all the way through 5th grade. I see those kids for 6 years, and I really want them to leave me with a super broad experience of many, many different things. And the more varied I can make that experience, the more it is, the more important it is to me. And I'm lucky that my district lets me make those choices. They trust me as a professional to say, really, you think that's the way to go? Like, yeah, I want to try it. Okay, go for it. And they've never, I've been honest with them. I've gone into like, this one was kind of a failure. I don't like this. We're going to move on from there. This particular thing is better placed here. Okay, great. Thank you for being honest. Let's take care of that. So they've always let me fail. And I've always embraced the failures or not such failures, but things that don't quite fit, and gone on and tried new things. So that's the absolute most important thing, is just to accept the fact that some things might not work and learn from it, and be a professional and just go in and change things that need to be changed, and accept the fact that the first, second, third time that you do something might not work out well.
Right.
Well,
So go ahead.
I think that like we've had conversations, all of us at this table, to say that, there's plenty of learning in those less than successful experiences.
Yeah.
And when talking with an admin, you're really looking at, growth and opportunity. And I think when you're saying student centered, one of the things that I want to point out that I just thought of is someone in a special criteria, which STEM is often put into as a box of, hey, this is what you can do with kids for 40 some minutes, one time a week. Was that 20 some times a year? When you look at it from that narrow lens, and immediately you saying, hey, I have this opportunity from K through 6. What am I building towards? That seems like you can actually build something. So from both of your perspectives, STEM was a justification for a long time. How do you go and say, I'm going to use the time that I have to make it as purposeful as possible?
Ooh, that's a good one. Wow. I would have to say, to start out, I look at my kindergarten kids, and we have a solid map. We sit down and look all the way up. When these kids leave me, what do we want them to be the best at? And really, I don't want them to be great at anything. I want lots of experiences. So if we can send out a well-rounded student that has the ability to look at any kind of problem, any kind of new technology, and say, okay, I have no idea what this is, but I am going to approach it as I approach everything else. I'm not going to panic, and I'm just going to go into that totally new thing that I don't know how to work, and I'm just going to explore it and figure out how it works. If we can send them off just with that skill, to just say, I can handle this, and just do it, then that would be the number one thing that I look at.
Which is completely applicable, because you look at 20 years on the horizon, whatever job they have one job, and they use this program for when they work in HR. This is the program they use. They get a new job, they're going to use a completely different program, and they have to be able to adapt. Right? You go from growing up on a Mac, and then your college forces you to use PC. It's the same idea. You have to be able to navigate that technology, or that just problem in general of, I have a skill set to lean on. How can I use that skill set to help me solve that problem?
And I don't know the exact number anymore, but years ago it was something like 90% of the jobs that we're preparing students for won't even exist when they get into that job market. So they need to be prepared to take on anything and to solve a problem and to tackle that problem without any fear, to say, I've got this, I can do this, I've done it a million times, I'm in and I can handle this.
Ryne, from taking that to the next step, you are in a not only instructional responsibility role, but also a financial responsibility role of saying, what we don't know is what you need to prepare for. You are guiding districts every single day that they come into Flux. How do you take that responsibility and feel like you're doing justice by,
Yeah.
and I don't know if that's being the front edge of what is available and say, this is what is there. You know, we can't prepare for things that we don't know, but
Yeah.
how are you guiding districts? Because you're sitting around with very important people, superintendents and board members, beyond just teachers that you're providing training to use what they already have better.
Yeah, I think part of it is, the goal is to build something that I wish I had when I was a teacher. So like a resource that I could reach out to, not just some like, fancy salesman that never taught before that, tells you this is the best product or this is the best platform and it's only X amount of dollars, but you get curriculums, like they didn't even use that word, right? They just would throw buzzwords out there. So to be that like vetting arm that any client that we work with, the partnering district, like we feel like we're part of their team, even from, is this investment, worth it? Is it the biggest bang for dollars? Are we being fiscally responsible with what's going on? So I think it's refreshing because I think schools get excited about the work that we're doing, seeing that we'll pick, different things and vendors from different people, and our team will vet it out. Does it work? Is there a yearly subscription? What's the cost? How many students are going to do it? But more importantly, what is the student experience? Like, what are the students going to get out of having this program? And then how are teachers going to support it? How can we support the teachers? What's the onboarding look like? So a lot of people have called us like a coach for the instructional coaches, like, a vendor, reseller, consultant, whatever you want to call us, that they can rely on to help them get some pretty cool things, knowing that every day we're waking up trying to figure out what does the future of education look like and how can we do that. So, even backing up a little bit further, to his point about, I think for education is if school becomes a spot where you could look at any and all experiences from arts to plant science, agriculture, hydroponics, coding, electronics, poetry, writing, whatever. If school is a series of experiences and every kid, regardless of grade, ability, level, gifted, not gifted, life skills, has all of those experiences to figure out what they like and don't like, that's going to help them create more of a purpose and a passion, right? Because if I wake up every day knowing that, hey, I'm excited about esports, okay, I need this level of math, this level of reading, and I should look for these experiences in my school to build my craft to one day wake up in the world of esports, that's going to be exciting to me. So I think often in schools, kids don't have a purpose. They don't realize that a lot of their passions and hobbies can be careers. So all the stuff that we do in STEM and ed tech and that all world, it's like just trying to create as many experiences as possible for kids to see it. And I think though, easier said than done, right? You guys, we've all been in the classroom. So cool. The cooler things that I do usually relate to more funding and or more things that I have to learn as a teacher. But I think that's where you can kind of pick and choose new programs you implement and what's going on. So, I think at the end of the day, if we focus on what experiences are and what goes into those experiences, each school, each year could be doing something and improving. And I think that's the way a lot of people are headed, which is exciting.
So I want to speak to our regular ed classroom teachers that are listening, which I know we have a lot of, and go back to our roots of being just a classroom teacher where as elementary, we have them, or you're still there.
Yep.
Didn't graduate. You can say
yet.
go back to your roots as fourth grade since
Yeah.
you're moving to fifth grade. Finally passed fourth grade.
Yeah. Hey.
So
Congrats on that.
So
by the way.
going back as
job.
self-contained teachers, or as someone that had 6,
Yeah.
7 classes a day where you were teaching science, we were teaching all the subjects, bringing in this cool stuff. How would you encourage a teacher that says, I want to do this, I see the value, I see what Tom is saying of I want them to have that problem solving mentality. How do you just start to bring that into your classroom? How do you get your mindset ready and your students' mindset ready? And what are some of those initial experiences you would recommend for them to check out or try with their students?
Yeah, I mean, it's not new, but the whole idea about like the process over product, right? Like we have a saying here when we do a lot of the design thinking stuff and inventing, and I'm sure you're the same way. It's like, we want kids to be able to share their ideas off at the roughest and earliest stages. So we want you to share something that's not polished. You're not getting graded on the thing that you're making. You're getting graded on the journey you took to get there, right? Like, are you reflecting? Are you reiterating? Are you inventing? Are you doing that? So that's something you could take in every class. Maybe math, because you need a right answer at some point. I don't know, but I didn't teach math. Physics. I mean, I taught physics. But the whole point is like, more of a, hey, let's look, even if you got something wrong, go back and do it again. And that was, years that I taught was LMS Schoology. You could set assessments to take them over and over again. And I think for me as an 8th grade science teacher, the more that I got away from like big, huge summative assessments that were tests and quizzes, it was much easier for me to fit in some of these PBL stuff, more of experiences, more exploratory, toying around with like Genius Hour and integrating that in some concepts, which, so I think a lot of schools that we work with, it's the mindset culture of focus more on the process than the product. You know, what experiences are you giving kids? How are they reflecting on those experiences? I think it's much easier to tackle some of this open-ended stuff. You mentioned it earlier too, is support from administrators to say like, yeah, go give it a try. You know, let's see, even you as a teacher reflect and iterate what you're doing. And that seemed to be a healthy step for me to kind of get more of this interdisciplinary project-based stuff out.
I want to jump in for 1 second when you were talking about process. I was working with an art teacher this past year, and she wanted me to look at her rubrics for the projects that they did. And she said that, you know, her students at this point were electing to take art, so they were mostly passionate about it. And we didn't change any of our rubrics. All we did was, when the students got to a stage of the rubric where they were at the decision point of like when it came to shading, like they were at that part of the project, they met with the teacher and said, here is how I plan on shading this piece. And the teacher would evaluate their understanding of the skill and give them a grade on that in the moment, and then also provide feedback and say, well, that's good, but don't forget to do this, this, and this, and make notes of that. And then their final product was graded on the use of the feedback, not how well it was performed. And so the richness of it was so much deeper, and the products improved as well because the students were getting more live or more relevant feedback at the time versus post-assessment giving them feedback on what they created. So when you said process over product, it made me think of that.
Yeah, and we'll let you talk in a minute, but
Maybe.
no, but that's how the real world is, right?
Right.
Like that's how jobs are. That's how industry is. Like, you know, Cole, who's helping out with the stream over there.
Thanks, Cole.
Hey, Cole. Like he's constantly improving his craft, and after this one, he'll figure out a way to make us look better and more in shape or nicer.
If he can,
you know, if we can. Tough task, Cole. I know, but like, you know, even coming out of education now into more of the industry business world, like a lot of cases, it's not a one and done thing. It's like, hey, how are you improving each day? How are you getting better? And I think schools have to reflect that. It goes back to are kids adaptable? Can they learn new things? And, you know, company A Salon that is next door to us, the drone dogs and drones and stuff like that. You don't even need to know coding language. You just have to know like how coding works. Like they'll teach you what you need to know. So it's not even memorization. It's more, you know, be able to apply all that problem solving, 4 C's, 5 C's, or float your boat, but some of that stuff. You have the floor.
So, what was the question again?
What are your recommendations to regular ed classroom teachers, whether they're self-contained elementary, teaching a subject secondary? How do they bring this mindset and some of this into their classroom when they don't have a dedicated STEM time?
Can I add to that? I think a lot of people listening hear something like hour of code and feel like I know how to get through the first hour, but beyond that is really challenging. So maybe kind of go in that direction of saying, you know, if there's these preset activities that this robot tells me I can do, I'll do them, and then I'm totally lost where I go next.
Okay, so number one, don't be afraid to ask for help. There are people somewhere out there, whether they be in your district or someone like me who is just randomly around the area in Pennsylvania who will gladly help out. There's someone who will jump in, that guy, but people want to help you. People want you. They just want to, I want to share ideas with people. I'm not a very creative person, but I can apply things from my experience. So if you have an idea, and I love it when a teacher comes to me and says, hey, we're working on this math unit and I want to make it more dynamic. These are the topics that we hit throughout the unit. Will you work with me and can we integrate some technology? Will this idea that I'm thinking of work out, or is there a better idea to integrate? I love to work on those projects with people, and that's just fantastic. I love that. I also refuse to grade, like you said, the grading process. I refuse to grade on a final product. I want to give you a grade on grit. And every day that you came to me, did you make what you were working on better? Some people are natural great coders. They can code 3 weeks or 4 weeks worth of a plan that I have, and they can be done in an hour. Great job, Billy. But what are you going to do today to make that thing better?
Mm-hmm.
Don't just say, I'm done, it's over, project done, and sit there for 3 weeks and play cool math games or something. Just what can you do to make this thing better? And that's another thing that you said. Where do you go after that hour of code? The same exact thing. All right, guys, we did and accomplished what I was hoping we could do. So now what should we do with this? Like I'm out of ideas. I don't know what to do, guys. So what can we do? What would you do to make this better? What do you think we should do? Should we make it sillier? Should we go for making it do a more complicated task? Where do you want to go with that? And when I do that with my students, that's when I get the coolest stuff. That's when I get the greatest ideas. This year we were playing around with Vex Robotics, and some kids wanted to do a robot dance-off. They built their robots, they coded them, they were great at it. And like, we did your obstacle course, we're bored now. Okay, well, what do you want to do? Let's do something more fun. We'll pick a song. You're going to play it on your record player, and we're going to have robots dance off to it. And another group was like, oh, we don't want to dance. We just want to make the robot do the entire course autonomously. Okay, great. You can do that too. So wherever your brain takes you with extending that activity, that's where you get the awesomest stuff, when you let students take charge.
Well, and I think we hear this almost every week about when student-centered learning and giving them the autonomy to make decisions and kind of guide the process, as opposed to feeling like you have to control, and giving up that control is probably the hardest thing for so many of us as natural teachers, because lecture is a lot of times the easiest, most convenient way to deliver. It just doesn't usually turn out effective. So just kind of adding on to the idea of student-centered, how do you judge how big to make a project or product? Because I could easily see something like project-based learning, when you say, oh, you know what, I have 3 weeks that I'm going to work on this, either turn into a 2-day activity that maybe, you use your philosophy to expand it as much as you can, or it could easily bite off a huge project that could be multi-year. What is it parameters? Is it guidance? Is it here are the principles that you're trying to accomplish? Where are you structuring it so you make sure it doesn't get out of hand?
2 words: on board. If I am doing something as a teacher and at any point I feel like I'm bored, then my students were bored 2 weeks ago.
I thought you said on board. I was like, what are you jumping on?
I'm bored.
Okay.
So, I mean, I have the attention span of a 4th grader. So it does help for me when I do something. Yeah, we got the basics across. All right, guys, now I'm bored. I don't know what to do with this thing. What do you want to do with this? You know what can be done. Let's use our imaginations. Let's do something better. Why am I the guy in charge here that says, you're going to create this Scratch project that's going to make this happen, and I want that to happen? Why? That's no fun. Yeah. There's no engagement. They do the job and they get done. How can we make whatever it is we're doing better? How could I do a better job?
Yeah.
Help me do my job better.
And you bit off a huge project when you really entered the field of opening the hub, which was renovating an entire space, and kind of I'm sure it wasn't haphazard, but knowing you, it might have been a little bit
haphazard.
But in that realm of that is a massive, there is certain parts of that once you've gone through that step, you're not coming back, and you have to figure out a solution. If you're ripping things down, if you're, totally starting in one area, well, you can't leave one area look great and, 75% of the space look dysfunctional.
Yeah, and I think, the opportunity we had was it couldn't get any worse than what it was. And we wanted a space that was not going to replace a class, but be used as an extension of all classes. So traditionally, if I'm doing a lesson, whatever subject, I'm going to have to go to the library to do research. So I sign the library out, I go there to do research, and I come back. Or I have to use the computer lab for this lesson, so I sign at a computer lab. It was the same kind of mindset. It was just, I'm now signing out the maker space. And it was cool because, again, even helping I had Spanish teachers using the makerspace to build out floor plans and build structures, and the whole tinkering, bringing that to other subjects, which, lends to the interdisciplinary and helps them create more experiences of it. But I think at the end of the day was like, how can this spaces be used with intention that if I'm doing a lesson related to this, I can go find that material, or like have that be a place that could get messy, or have the materials in it that was used. So, which was good. But yeah, but even the building of that spot was an experience because I used students to help me out.
Yeah.
We didn't have any money to do it, so it was really cheap labor. But the other good part was like they loved it. Like it was something different. It was something that they could own and something they could do. And going back to your part about like there's no real end. You can always improve. You can always be better at something. Like having these challenges. I think one of the cooler things I ended up doing was I brought back like the mousetrap car, and we used it for physics and kinetic potential energy and simple machines. And throughout the phase of the project, you can start by building one, but then when you got the concept of like wheel and axle and friction and how kinetic stored energy or potential stored energy turns into kinetic, like they improved their mousetrap car as it went. Was it harder than just giving them a textbook and graphic organizers? Felt like, yeah, but was it a better learning experience? I think so, because not only did they get the content of some of this stuff, but more importantly, they worked on grit and worked on being resilient and trying to figure stuff out and fight through it and improve upon what it is. And the sky's the limit in that case, because they always kept trying to make their car go further, and the process of reflecting on what worked and journaling. Like that's the stuff, the skills that you need in any job. Any job that you have, you're looking out how can I be better than a competitor? How can I set myself apart to be hired? Like that's the mindset I think we have to bring in more schools.
Well, in that, I'll let you jump in, but just that mindset of that unit or that lesson, whatever you were describing, when you do it again, it becomes easier. It becomes easier for you to plan.
Yep.
And it also becomes easier for the students to navigate because they become comfortable with that style of instruction, and then they crave that, that style of instruction.
And that's where the intentionality of like learning management systems, or we had Schoology at the district, was I could put in checkpoints, or I could put in little quizzes to kind of check in to assess what they need. I could put out information. So like that's an example of intentional implementation of ed tech to help me accomplish what I wanted to do there.
Well,
And then you add in another tool in the maker spaces where the resources and materials available, and we have the tools there that the kids could use. And so that's where it all like fits together. Say, okay, what is needed to make this experience?
One of the things I remember you did when you were in the classroom was you would use like data validation to make sure kids were only able to submit a final answer. And you might be familiar, you've done like an exit room. The idea of in a Google form, you have to put a specific answer. A lot of times they describe it like birth date if they wanted a certain pattern, making sure you follow through there, that you would go through and take mundane tasks and just simply say, if this is a passive activity, you need to submit the correct answer. You did 3 days of homework. Can you go through and you have to submit in the next 10 minutes? Some kids are scrambling to get it done, whereas, kids that did it are able to plug it in and go on and do something.
And I'll add tools like that where I could monitor and track what students were doing without even really hovering over their shoulder asking them. Like it allowed for more intentional one-on-one meeting or small group meetings because we had tools like Schoology or Enter, whatever LMS you're using. Like, and that's the intent behind, what you were talking, I think we're getting to, is like future of education through ed tech stuff. Like, why couldn't you have that, mass customized learning, self-paced type personalized learning happen within schools where here's a series of experiences and processes. It's a real word, right? Processes. Sorry, it sounded fancy. Where like we track how far you've gotten it, and even that, okay, you're done with that one. Well, half the class isn't, but half the class is. Why don't you guys move on? Like it just allows that autonomy, self-choice that I think scares a lot of teachers, but it's like an organized chaos, right? It's an organized, things are happening all at the same time. But I enjoyed days like that teaching because it felt like everything was more active. They're not just listening to me talk for 50 minutes. It's, you have more control over it, but they also have control on what they want to do each day.
Do you remember what you wanted to?
Yeah. So I just wanted to add that a really hard lesson for me to learn was where to draw the line, where to say, all right, we have beaten this horse enough. There's 4 or 5 of us who are still just trucking with it and going hardcore, but the rest of us, we're ready to move on. So where do you draw that line? It's a very, very hard thing to nail down. And the one thing that helped me the most is I watch when students are coming into my room. I get new students every 45 minutes. So when they come into the room, if they're bouncing and ready to go and opening up computers, then they're ready to continue with what we're doing. When they come in and they put their computer down on the table and it's quiet, then it's either the day after Halloween or they're done. Like, okay, are we going to do this again? And then that's when you have to say, okay, maybe we've exhausted this topic and it's time to move on to something else. It's a tough one to gauge, but it's very important.
And but what I like about that is it's going to change year to year and class to class.
Every class, yep.
Grade to grade. And once I had a decent asset or a decent amount of assets in my room of technology pieces and different STEM pieces, I can remember I had years where when I said, hey, we're going to be doing this as part of our enrichment activity, they would go nuts for it. So like I kept using those more than I may have with different classes. And what I would say is for regular education teachers looking to integrate it, think about as a secondary teacher, the prep you teach that you're strongest in or that you've taught for the longest, or as an elementary teacher teaching all subjects, which one do you feel most confident with? And make that the one that you try to figure out, how can I innovate this a little bit?
Yeah.
Right. Math was by far my strongest subject as a teacher initially. And so bringing in coding robots to code shapes and to, use that to explore geometry and explore, like rates and things like that was a lot easier for me to do because I was confident in that instruction. And then also just looking at, what is out there that you can do to enhance the experience or to make it different than what you can. And a lot of the stuff is free. A lot of the stuff is online and available. Like I think we've mentioned it at least a couple other times, like Tinkercad is one of the best programs out there. It's a 3D design program that you can take to a 3D printer, but you don't need a 3D printer for. I taught all of my three-dimensional shapes in 5th grade purely through Tinkercad because it's better than a flat piece of paper, right? A flat piece of paper with three-dimensional shapes does not make sense to a lot of students. And even working with kindergarten teachers, they took a 3D printing course with me and they're like, this is great. Like, I love this, but I don't think my kindergartners can print with this. I said, you're right. They can't design on their own, but they had a unit where they looked at how the pitch of a ramp and the length of a ramp changed how far a ball rolled. It was part of their FOSS kit. I said, well, why don't you design a basic ramp, which is just a 3-dimensional triangle in Tinkercad, and let each group tell you, make it longer, make it taller, make it shorter, and have them design their ramp by talking to you and print each group's ramp and see who's wins, right? So they were doing Tinkercad. They weren't dragging the mouse because they can't handle that, but they can still go through that process.
Have you seen the most recent updates?
You could do that.
They've added physics now. So you can create those ramps and alter them, and then you can actually put a sphere on there and watch it roll.
Can you control like gravity too or something?
Oh, they've added so much to it. There's so many different possibilities.
Even using Tinkercad, I've complimented Ryne too much already. So Tommy G, I remember one thing that you had said early on was the idea of, if my kids can pitch to you a purpose for anything that they're designing, we'll use that as an example, and it's not something that you could go to the local corner store and purchase for a few dollars, that you'd be willing to print that. And I just think something that stuck out to me was, if you take that same mentality to a broader perspective and say, it is, I love to use the word grit and just kind of processing through, feel free to take it in this direction too. I feel like website design, for instance, I don't know what grade level you would consider introducing that to kids, but when it transitioned into things like Wix and Weebly when it was around, and Google Sites where they could drag and drop and they didn't need to know the back-end coding, especially with future of education, we see things like AI and we feel like, oh, there's no way that I am smart enough or capable enough, or it can go down that realm. You're seeing grit be less needed to do cool things, but you also need grit to understand why those things work to improve. So in that realm, as we step into that next wave, and you're saying you need to make it better I know that you can drive this robot like a remote control, but you're not allowed to do this in my classroom. How do you continue to go back to that? You know, you could have done that in 3 minutes type scenario or bought it for $2. How do you apply that same philosophy to what you're choosing to put in front of kids today and going forward?
That's cool, but I can put this down.
Mm.
Like I just checked this out. This is really neat. I love what you did here. This is super fun, but I'm good now. I did it for 2 minutes, and that was a really neat thing there. But how are you going to hook me and keep me? Because the game you were just playing, you've been playing that for 4 days now. Every day you're in here, you don't put that thing down. And it's not any better than what you did here, but how are you going to hook me and keep me? Like, how are you going to innovate this? How are you going to make it better? Not that it needs to be better, but can you hook me like that does? How are you going to do that? And they want to. Every student looks at something that they're passionate about, and they want you to not be able to put it down. They want to hook that. They want you to not be able to turn off their YouTube channel. They want you to subscribe and watch everyone. How are you going to get me? Whatever it is, you got to get me. This is cool, but I'm not hooked yet.
Even if you are,
even if you are hooked, you have to be like, oh man, how can you make that a little cooler?
Yeah, absolutely.
But not to break their heart, but to encourage them to keep going with something.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I feel like, again, and that enters more in your realm as you're working with these, you're that middleman, realistically making suggestions, I would assume, in this current role, and saying, things like Fork Farms, which I know that you've ambassadored plenty, have been an ambassador for, like, meaningful. And I love your inclusion of things like woodshop, where there is no quicker, safer, different way to if I need something like this skill, there's only one way to really make that happen. How are you kind of merging, again, this as that grit level potentially becomes less, the idea of intentionality and continuing to push through? Why do I need to know the code or the understanding behind it?
Yeah. Well, and I think there's tons of schools, it goes back to the comment you're saying about, like, there's tons of teachers, tons of schools doing really cool things. It's like when we partner with the district or we work with the school, we don't say like, hey, just throw everything out. It's no, like, audit or look at, like, what are days that you like teaching? What are some cool programs that you're already doing? But there's always something to improve upon. There's always something to create, which is why I get excited about, like, innovative ed or STEM programs, because the course in itself should be evolving as new tech becomes available, right? Like, we should have modules right now showing kids the powers of AI and the responsibility with AI. Like, if theoretically speaking, if you're a school not doing that right now, I'd argue you might even be a little bit behind, like, some of the tools that exist. And, then you get into conversations like, well, are we still teaching them typing, which I hope you're not, but it's another day. But, are we, Google Docs, all that stuff is very important stuff. But I think the goal is, if we're not trying every day to improve education or create new programs for kids, I think we're missing out, because the world in itself is changing. So, we as Flux Space, if we could be a spot that at least could show you what we think's out there, or like, hey, these are set of experiences that we can bring to schools. Come see it, experience it, test it out, play with it, understand how this could prevent or create more opportunities for schools. I think we're winning. But again, it's not tech for tech's sake. It's not just we're going to do STEM for STEM. I have a 3D printer or a makerspace. I just need a 3D printer. It's like still have some intentionality behind it, and there's more of a plan there. I think more of a plan. There's more programs stick.
I still teach typing.
Do you really?
Yes, I do.
Really?
Yeah. So
You also work with K through.
and there's an intentionality behind it, and I will explain.
Maybe we
my
save this
reasoning.
for another session, but I would love to debate this with you, because I would love a gentleman that's been in education for about 50 years. I would love to hear in all seriousness, like, what's the type?
And let's just make sure we do one thing for our listeners, not our viewers. Ryan, can you control your hands and stop bumping this
Where
table?
do I put my hands?
All right, and you use the word that, and I want to hear your answer, that we've been circulating this whole conversation, is being intentional. The word intentional, I think, is very important in this, and we've mentioned it a lot. So what's your intentionality in
I
typing?
fought for years to have typing completely removed from the curriculum that I was forced to teach. And once it was completely removed, after 2 or 3 years, there was a significant decrease in any student being able to put letters into a machine. And starting with my kindergartners, I cannot teach them keyboarding until about January, when they've got more of a grasp on the entire alphabet. But when they come back from Christmas break, we spend a couple weeks learning keyboard awareness. Where is the letter A? Where is that letter S? What happens when you push that letter?
Okay.
We more or less play games with it so they can learn it. I don't teach home row. Never will.
Okay.
It's
I think that's where I'm
useless.
at. I'm at, like, high school class I took, like, who cares if I don't use my pinky? Like, come find me in 10 years and tell me why I'm, like.
No, not at all.
No, but I, it's the digital, not those that are digital natives, the digital immigrants of, like.
Well, and it's like you said, it's awareness, and it's being more efficient, right? It's being able to type more code, to create faster, to be able to use your time more efficiently. And it's the same as knowing the control shortcuts, right? Control X, Control V, like that type of thing. It's important for them to be more productive in that sense.
The typing I'm talking about is like, oh, you're at 50 words per
Home
minute.
row.
How do we get you to 100 rows? Because that's going to determine. No, like if you're.
Are you a slow typer? Is that
why? Yeah. How do you make them capital? Yeah. Now they're all capital. No,
that happens in kindergarten.
Correct. And I'm appreciative that you're answering that way, because I guess it makes sense. Like even the shortcuts and shift control, what it does. What I'm talking about is like there's still schools that out there that like, oh well, we need to make you a faster typer to go do it.
And that's a
but
priority.
That's such a waste. Yeah,
right?
And that's such a waste of time. It's like, and again, like some of the Google Docs and navigating, like I think it's powerful, and I think computer tech programs, not really getting off on a tangent, but there's parallels to STEM and coding. But okay, if I'm computer tech, I'm going to teach you how to use a Google Doc. I'm going to teach you how to share. I'm going to teach you how to do that.
Absolutely.
That transfers into ELA classes, math classes, where they're using those skills to do work and do assignment. Same thing for coding. Hey, I'm going to teach you some Scratch stuff, but now they can use Scratch coding, block-based coding in ELA and math. And so I think it runs parallels there. What I'm saying is I think a lot of schools are stuck in their ways. Cursive could be, maybe we table that for another day. But like, if your argument is I don't have enough time in the day to do it, let's audit the time in the day you do have with kids that's instructional wise, and let's value what you're actually doing with each kid. Because if they're not getting experiences, like think about what cool experience they could be getting in place of something that you've just been doing it because we've always done it, right?
I put a great value on voice typing.
Yeah.
So once they learn where the letters are on a keyboard, or they have a rough grasp, then from first, second, third, first day of school, every year we practice the right way to voice type. There are very, very poor ways to voice type, and it doesn't work for you, and it frustrates the teacher and the students. If you spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes reminding them, this is the distance from the microphone, speak with a normal voice, speak clearly in full sentences, then I've taken 20, 30 minutes out of my time, but now that's going to transfer into their classroom every single day. So it's a different way to type. I still do teach it.
And it's as a classroom teacher integrating that stuff in. Again, the question is how do I fit this in when I struggle to hit all the standards that I hit? And you and I have had this conversation because I know we were very similar for years in bringing more of this in and not cutting things out of the curriculum and saying like, yeah, my students still perform the same as they did every other year, but they had this many more experiences and they've learned this many more skills. I'm never saying, hey, this is going to raise your scores, but they'll stay where they're at. They'll still continue to learn the content, but also gain all of these other experiences. You just do, again, with intentionality. Like the analogy I always use for Google Slides. You want to teach your classroom how to use Google Slides because in theory, they've never used it before. Do a vocab review, have them put the word as the title, the definition as it's just the description, and put a picture in that represents that word. Now you've taught them how to use Google Slides and you did your vocab review that you needed. Like you don't have to be super creative in how you embed that. Now you can do a Google Slides project because they've learned that program. Now you can do a coding project because you had them code something to go to 6 different vocab words in sequential order if it's a history class. So there are ways to bring that into your classroom.
Yeah, it's almost the ed tech STEM sprinkles on something that already exists, right? And that goes back to don't throw everything out and start over, but there's some ways that you can improve upon lessons you have. Right
So to wrap up this conversation, I want you to
Done
leave
already?
Yeah, we're getting there.
now.
I want you to leave our audience with something that they can walk away with and think about and some advice. So we're
We're
gonna
gonna leave them powered up.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
That's Matt's job. Yeah. So
Oh,
so I want you to speak to decision makers,
okay.
right, or someone that
Just don't teach typing.
that can get into the ear of decision makers on what are the possible next steps to innovate a single class or a
Yeah.
larger space.
Okay.
And then Tom, I'd love you to speak more to teachers that have been teaching tech ed or STEM or something that is that isolated special, that what can they start to look at or what can they start to do to continue to innovate that program. And then Matt, maybe you can wrap it up with like a regular ed teacher.
Yeah.
Okay. Start.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. I just got nervous.
It's a tough question.
It is. No, I would say our experience, districts that we're working with, I've always appreciated the team approach, right? Like you're trying to transform education, you're trying to bring new innovative programs to your school, get all of the stakeholders on board, like the computer tech teacher, science teachers that are excited about, like any teacher that shows excitement about ed tech, or like involve them on a team. I'm not saying a committee of like 50 people, but like form that group. Because a lot of times my experience was sometimes ed tech or STEM is like put on you to do without you really willing to want to do it. So I think look for the cheerleaders, the early adopters that are going to get excited about doing this thing, and have them have buy-in in terms of the conversation. You know, look for those teachers that have expressed interest in updating programs, making new spaces, new experiences, things like that. Because often we do a ton of tours here. So a quick plug for us, any district that wants to come hang out, spend the day. The rule is just come around lunch, because then I get some cheesesteaks. But the whole goal would be come as a tour. Yeah, I'm not joking. Yeah. We've had districts travel all over the state, which is pretty cool. But that team that I talked about, like, hey, here's what we're doing well. Here's some goals that we have, and here's where we think we can go. And that think we could go and where we can go, that's where we kind of help shape that there. So people walk around Flux Space, they walk around the Experience Center, they get excited about what future of learning could look like from a very hands-on, these are things that are happening in other districts, or hey, the groups of 30 students over there are working on empathy and design thinking because we're partnering with that district on their Makerspace STEM program. So I would say the team approach, the try before you buy, the crawl, walk, run, I say a lot, like try some things, sampling things here. Which isn't great business for me, because sometimes I say, well, hey, don't buy 100 of those, just maybe get 1 or 2 and try it out to see if you like it. But I think that's refreshing for schools, because you're really practicing what you preach in this whole, like, hey, let's implement design these experiences based off intention and not just flash in the pan, tech sake for tech sake. So I think that planned approach, team approached, crawl, walk, run is something we love to do.
I have almost the same exact answers.
Do you?
Oddly enough, I would say go out there if you're feeling stale. You feel like, and it happens to me often. Like I need something new. I haven't done something new in a while. Go out there, find a new network of people. There's lots of ways to find new networks out there. So go find another network of educators that are doing something amazing that's going to inspire you. Go to some place like Pete and C, or go to ISTE, which is in Philadelphia this year in just a couple of days.
Yeah, when's this coming out? It's coming out before ISTE.
After.
Oh, okay. So
ISTE
go
was
check.
great.
Go to ISTE next.
ISTE was awesome. You should go. When you're there, come find us. We're always there.
Yeah.
But go out there and see what other people are doing. There's no reason for you to sit in your basement and try and reinvent the wheel. Go look what other people are doing. See what they're doing and be inspired by that to do something different.
I thought
You're not alone.
I thought you were gonna say, like, don't be in your basement crying. Like, I went to some like teachers. Like,
Well, and it's
You are far from alone. There's thousands of us out there. Go learn from those people. Go see what they do and learn from them.
And it, what I love about you giving that advice is you easily could have been doing the same thing for the last 7 years, and you would still be in the upper third of what STEM teachers are doing in the area, right? And like, I remember so many times learning something from you and then texting you maybe 8 months later about, like, oh, I just did these. Like, yeah, that's awesome. I don't do those anymore. Yeah, I moved on. So then I'm learning the next thing from you, because you have such an innovative space. And I think that's why your students thrive so much, because you have not become stale in your mindset. And that mindset is so important for your students.
And Ken's getting accolades from your, disposed ideas.
Which is
That's
great.
the thing.
Take it.
Yeah.
If I'm doing the same, and I've always worked this way, if I'm doing the same job in 3 years that I did 3 years ago, then I need to retire and I need to leave that job.
Mm-hmm.
My job should not be the same every year. A job in tech like this, it should be different all the time.
Yeah. From the regular ed teacher perspective, I love what you said. Just that idea of finding a network. I've shared I'm moving grade levels for the first time in my career and trying to figure out this new norm and this responsibility. And I think the word I've used in previous episodes is just permission, giving yourself permission to have days that you do incredible and you really gear up, and then you have some maybe lower tech or less ambitious days, or you turn it over to kids a little bit more, and just stand to those same foundational items of, if it's good for kids, you're not going to have any worries about it. Because I think it's an uncomfortable conversation to say that, if I have a kid going to your class and coming to me and they have a great experience, or they went to the hub and they come back to my ELA class, we are in a position that, it is easy to get ourselves less than favorable when we are pushing others out of their comfort zone. And that's a realistic thing that as you go, you have to be mindful of. We had a buddy of all of ours, Mike Creed, who sat on actually after an episode and just said that he really struggled with his coworkers at one point, one of the schools he was in, because he was not taking no for an answer. If he felt like it was a good idea, even though the way it had been done for a long time, it didn't matter. It was the way that he was going to run his space. And I think as we go into this venue of, we don't know what we're preparing for, we don't know what the kids are going to throw at us. All we know is that we are going to do right by kids, and we're going to see them bloom and just kind of take off. That's really the mindset of, it gives in that permission to say, pressure. Board is not invited in on the first day that I'm trying this activity, but it could be a showcase, or it could be an opportunity that I'm, summatively showing off Tom G's old ideas as, these progressive new ideas. So I think that permission, the lack of, I have to do it all the time. If I just need them to do traditional worksheets, but that there is a place for that, and maybe more mundane tasks. That idea of using an LMS to solidify, hey, can we move on, and those type of features, I think, really is where we frame purpose and as we go forward, making what is a great product for kids continue to be, what turns into them blossoming.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll add to that too is, if you're looking at something that's not free, one is there are grants out there. Your district likely has an education foundation. If they don't, there are hundreds of grants out there that you have the opportunity to get something. Just take a chance on something that you saw at a conference, right? Or you have that network and you get some ideas from that network, or just show it to your kids and say, we can write a grant to try to get one of these. What do you want to try to get? Right? You might have a couple months to use it, and then I'm going to use it with my class next year, but I want to try it. And if you do get that funding, I would encourage you, although we said this 7 years ago, don't buy from Amazon. That's what we used to say, because we didn't know any better. And now we know, you're in this, you're on the other side now, but there are good resellers of these products that can give you training, that can give you continued support. Something breaks, they can help you replace. They can be a resource for you. So, depending on where you are, those resellers are national or more local, but reach out to those. And also,
can I jump in there too?
Please.
I think the one thing that was always missing was the value added with coming with buying something. The idea of I felt like when I would buy stuff from my school, it was just either the manufacturer could help out or on a site, but there's not a local entity that I could keep relying on to help me out. And I was in a smaller district, so I didn't really have any tech coaches or instructional coaches or tech guys that would help the implementation of it. So I think that's the role that we fill a lot of times, is the more boots on the ground, hey, we'll show up, kind of help out with some of this stuff. Because it does take time. It does take investment of money, time, effort.
Mhm.
If we help out with the time and effort to, keep his stuff working or answer questions or things like that, I think that's the win, and that's the value added in some of it. So
Yeah, absolutely. And tap your administrators. They have money to spend. They do always have money to spend. And usually around like February, they're getting the emails from the business office. This money is about to expire. If you don't spend it,
Use it or lose it.
It's gone. And use your tactic of take whatever you're buying, figure out exactly how many kids are going to get their hands on it, and divide the total cost by the number of students and say, this is only going to cost $1.99 per student in the first year. So by next year, it'll cost less than $1 per kid to have this experience. So it's those frames can be a nice way to convince those administrators.
And have an open door for them to come see
Right.
it. Or if you can get a trial, reaching out to them directly,
Right.
or I'm sure you can line them up, like
Tons
have
of
them
demos.
in there to be, I've said it before, my kids are the best advocate for good teaching.
Mhm.
So if my kids are really like driving a teacher crazy, that's a great way for them to come down and say, what in the world were you doing?
Mhm.
In the same sense of if the product is actually usable and meaningful and changing learning and the kids can advocate for it, it's really hard to say no to a 10-year-old,
Mhm.
especially when you do have money, you
Right.
know that there's a budget
Right.
for it.
So to officially wrap this up, just let our audience know how and where they can connect with you. And then Matt, you'll close us on out.
Yeah, Ryne Anthony. Our website is fluxspace.io. Main headquarters is in Norristown, PA, just outside of Philly, but we have a location in Middletown, PA, coming online soon, Central PA. That one's attached to Tattered Flags Brewery. That'll be fun. And then we have a spot in Pittsburgh. We're currently in a spot there, but we're actually looking to get a bigger building out there, and also upstate New York in Geneva. But yeah, main part will be our website, www.fluxspace.io. FLUXSPACE.io.
Science teacher.
And supporting canceling typing and spelling classes.
Oh, and Mr. Ryne Anthony on Twitter or all that stuff.
I'm Tom Guellich. I guess, should I just give my email address?
Probably, since you are
Yeah,
terrible at
since
Twitter.
I stay away from Twitter. So my name is actually spelled GUELLICH at Gmail. And that's it. That's how you can get a hold of me if you need it.
Excellent. So as always, follow Matt at EdTechNeighbor, myself at Ken Ehrman, and our podcast at Power EDU Up. And we'll link up to all that stuff in our show notes, or just scroll down wherever you're watching or listening, and you'll find all that there. So gentlemen, thanks again for joining us.
Where do we get a t-shirt? Just noticed that.
Yeah, you can buy them on teachbetternetwork.com. Our swag store is there. Yeah,
You have
glad
a
you
t-shirt?
just noticed that.
I've got a mug. I don't have a t-shirt.
Yeah. He hasn't earned it yet. 200 shows.
Oh, all right.
I know. I didn't even bring
This
it
is
today.
133, and he's only been to about 125.
Oh, get out of here.
All right, Matt, why don't you take us on out of here?
Well, you broke our rule of not having friends on the podcast. So
That's right.
it took us 132 episodes until we have close friends on.
Friends.
Yeah, you made it.
All right.
So, but as we power down this episode, no doubt you guys left us powered up. Thank you. I know this episode's a tough one because we are trying to speak to things that we don't know. And I think you guys did a great job, especially as we launch into a new school year with plenty of new opportunities. So for our audience, stay well as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.